Hi, I'm Dr. Peter Coleman, retired physician, and today we're going to be talking about how drug abuse, drug use, the disease of addiction, affects the memory circuits of the brain. Because these are very powerful and it ends up causing a lot of people to relapse. We remember that when there's a dopamine spike in the reward system, memories get laid down for the actual drug use itself, but also for all of those associated memories. And as you remember, there are thousands and thousands of associated memories created associated with the drug use, especially because the drug use happens multiple times a day and for years usually at a time. And each of those associated memories become triggers. How triggers work is amazing. They actually release a little bit of dopamine, just as if the person had used the drug itself, which is unbelievable. So there are amazing studies with PET scanners, which are fancy cameras that can look at activity in the brain, that show how these triggers work. They actually release a little bit of dopamine in the reward system, just like the drugs did. So if they put people who haven't used drugs, cocaine or something like that, for 6 months or more, and they put them in a PET scanner and they show them a picture of some white powder or something like that, they will actually see dopamine going off in the reward system of the brain. It's just a little bit of dopamine, but it gives them enough of a trigger that they want more, and they report cravings if you ask them what's going on in their brain. So this is what happens with triggers. And of course, advertising companies take advantage of this all the time. When you walk into a fast food, they'll often have a huge picture of a chocolate milkshake there that just releases dopamine because it triggers you of memories of how good chocolate milkshakes actually taste. And sometimes that will be enough to sway us to decide, well, I think I'll have a chocolate milkshake today or something else. It's a special treat. So that's the way triggers work. They're incredibly powerful. They are even so powerful that we often get triggered even when we don't see things. So in these PET scanner studies, if they show the thing that triggers people in what we call a subliminal way, so it's less than, I forget, 0.2 of a second, so the person doesn't consciously see it, but it just flashed really fast, they still release dopamine in their pleasure center. Amazing. And that made me think about a patient of mine, Nora. She was a nurse and she was using drugs from the hospital that she was working at, and she got caught. She had to go to rehab. And she came home, and her husband, by the time she went to rehab, had started using with her, and he didn't want to stop. He said, I'm not ready to stop using my opioids. And she, of course, was on probation and had to stop because she was being drug tested. So he kept using, but he agreed that he wouldn't use in the house. So he would go out and use. But when he came back in the house and he'd been using, she could tell. She could just know that, and it triggered her. Within 2 weeks, she was back using again. It was very sad. So triggers are incredibly powerful, and they make drug use really hard to exist, really, really hard to resist. It makes it even harder when there's access to the drug. So if we go to a party and we know that there are some chocolate chip cookies in the other room or some cakes and things, we often will get some thoughts about it. But if we actually go in that room and stand next to the table, our triggers get stronger and we have access to the thing, and we're much more likely to make a decision to do it. And that reminds me of my patient, Steffi. She came back for another detox because she was doing really well for about 8 months. And then she looked in her sock drawer and she was cleaning out, and she found 2 OxyContin pills. She didn't even remember putting them there. She was using them within 2 hours. She got triggered, the dopamine went off in her brain, she had access to the drugs, and she just couldn't resist it. We know from studies that when we get triggered by these things, we get the dopamine, that lower amounts of blood go to our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain, of course, that allows us to resist impulses. And so we get strong urges and strong blood flow to the reward part that says we want this, and less blood flow to the part that says we can resist it. And that's, of course, what happens with this disease that causes an awful lot of people to relapse. The good news is that triggers go away, the memory circuits will settle down and fade, but lingering memories can be there for a long time. Just ask cigarette smokers, who will often say they haven't smoked for 5-10 years, but if they walk into a room and they smell some smoke, then they get a little bit of a trigger. It's usually not much, and it's easy to resist at that point. So in recovery, we need to pay attention to triggers. We need to make sure that we're not around things that will release dopamine in our pleasure center and give us triggers and make us want the drug and make it harder to resist. And over time, things get better and better and much easier.